Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 through 18. Christ above all. Christ above all. For this reason we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you, and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of His will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing Him, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all might according to His glorious power, for all patience and long-suffering with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of His love, in whom we have redemption through His blood, the forgiveness of sins. He, Christ, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by Him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things consist. And He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things He may have the preeminence, that in all things that Christ may be above all. Above all. Simple message this morning before we take the Lord's Supper. In Colossians, Paul approaches the Colossians and reveals to them four things, real quickly, four things in his prayer. I don't know whether I can get this thing to work, so you might just want to clip it. There you go. Thank you. And so the first thing he prays for is that they would be filled. Now, he doesn't say filled with the Holy Spirit here. That's a subject that Paul would address believers often, but he's not praying for that. He's praying for them to be filled with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. In other words, he's saying to them, you need to know more. You're still acting like some young believers. There's a lot more you need to know, and I'm praying that you have a hunger to know more, that you become filled. You become filled. Before I go any further on the 4 F's, my son came over, him and his family, Tuesday afternoon, and we visited, and my son and I took a walk, and as we're out walking, he was sharing with me what one of his children's friends had told him about their family. And that was the fact that basically it was a conversation that said, I always went to church. My parents always went to church. But I've been around your family now for a little over a year regularly. And you're not like my family. You're nothing like my family. Jesus isn't just something that you encounter and talk about every now and then. It's who you are. And my son was crying as he was sharing that with me, because there's a change in that person's life, and that person may be taken out of their life for a while. This is a lot easier to do. Would you not agree? Getting up on a Sunday morning and coming to church, even if you did it 52 weeks, that's pretty easy. I mean, how many days do you get up early and go to work? lot more than 52, right? And though some of those mornings are harder than others, you do it pretty good, right? They're coming here for 52 weeks. That's pretty easy. Following Christ. Every day for 52 weeks is hard. Raising kids on a mission field, there's a lot of things that your kids don't have that everybody else has. But because they've never had them, they don't know to want them. There was never a nursery. In fact, usually the worship rooms were so small that even everybody wouldn't fit in. In fact, it wasn't unusual for all the women and children to fill the building and the men to be standing outside and hanging in the windows and the doors. There's no nursery. There was no children program. There was no youth program. There was no college and career. It really wasn't much of a Sunday school. But let me tell you something. Most of those people got it right. Most of those people knew that following Christ was a whole lot more than sitting in a chair in a building. I thank the church for the gift to Trish and I. I meant to do that earlier. I also appreciate all the ones that are going to be filling in for me, because I drive out. Well, Bob is driving out. I'm going to ride the first part. But Wednesday morning, I head for Colorado to do what seems to be an annual thing for about 20 years, to go hunting. We'll go to church Sunday. You'll probably go to church, right? Probably. When I get out there, I never know whether he's going to listen. But if you are listening, Joe, I say this with all love. We'll get out there, and at some point, we'll connect with a man that didn't have anything that my kids had. We'll connect with a man that, when he thinks of prayer, he calls me, because he doesn't know how to pray yet, or may not even know that he can. But the first time I met him, I want to use him as an illustration. The first time I met him was at the base of a mountain with a broken back. You remember that? Broke my back 2 years ago. I broke my back August the 25th, which is my wife's birthday. That's why I remember it. Broke my back on her birthday. 2 months later, I was in Colorado because I had made a commitment to about 9 men, I think it was. And I'm at the base of the mountain while all the men are hunting because I can't hardly move. And this, Joe, this is for you. This is what I really think about what you look like. This little bitty, scrawny, short guy gets out of the car where he was asleep, which I didn't know he was there. I pulled up to this lake. I'm going to go ahead and say it. No, I'm not, because next year somebody might be hunting there. But anyway, we pulled up to this place, and I'm sitting there. I'm there trout fishing. And this guy, little scrawny guy, gets out. We start having a conversation. I'm talking to him. I started the conversation. And then all of a sudden he stops me in the middle of the conversation. He says, now, I'm in Colorado. I haven't tried to witness. I haven't pulled out a Bible. I'm not in a suit. I'm in camouflage. He says to me, are you a Southern Baptist preacher? That's it. Let me tell you something. Do you realize how big of a question went all the way down to just like that? And I looked at him and I said, where would you ask that question? He said, just answer the question. I said, no, you answer. He said, answer the question, I'll answer yours. I said, yeah, I'm a Southern Baptist minister. I said, now why? He said, because you talk like my father-in-law. Which I found out later wasn't his father-in-law. It's sort of like his father-in-law, but it's really his wife's grandfather, which he lived with, who served time, well, he did. Served time as a missionary for a while and knew the word. And evidently, because I didn't use any of the four-letter words that others were using in his world and other things, and because the fact that I was giving away tons of hunting information that they're not used to, I sounded like a Southern Baptist. He didn't know what a Christian was. He just knew his grandfather. And he knew his grandfather was different. He saw that on me. You and I have to be filled if we're going to reflect the presence of Christ. We have to be fully. What's the rest of that word? Fully what? What's it say? Fully pleasing Him. Verse 10. Praying that you fully pleasing to Him. That you're fully pleasing Him. Are you fully pleasing to Him? If the qualification for taking the Lord's Supper for you and I this morning was to be able to say, I am fully pleasing Him, how many would be able to take the Lord's Supper? I wouldn't be able to take the Lord's Supper. Is that even a goal for you, though? Is that something you're striving for? Is that something you even want? Do you want to be filled with knowledge and understanding of who God is, of the depth, height, and length, and width of His love? Do you really want to be filled with that? Do you really want to be fully pleasing to Him? Do you really want to be fruitful for Him? He also prayed that they would be strengthened or fortified. Fortified in all might, so that you may for all patience and long suffering with joy. That's the introduction. Let's get to the message, or we won't get to the Lord's Supper. Skip to the very latter part of that. So, I'm filled, I'm fully, I'm fruitful, I'm striving for being fortified in Him. Why? Well, the bottom line is the latter part, which is really where I want to focus, and that is because Christ is above all. He's not only above all, I just want you to listen, Jesus is all. Now, I want you to think about that. Jesus is all. So, if Jesus is all, then there's no way you would struggle with saying that Jesus is the only way to heaven. And yet, do you realize that a large percentage of the American church that is polled does not believe, over 50% does not believe that Jesus is the only way to God? 50% don't believe that. Well, evidently they forgot the other part. They're not filled with all understanding and knowledge and wisdom. Therefore, they're not fully pleasing to Him. They're not fruitful. They're not fortified. They can't even deal with the first all that Jesus is. Jesus is all. Therefore, if he is all, there are none others. And there is no other way anyone can get to the Father unless Jesus isn't all. But he is all. He is all in so many ways. He's over all. That's what he says in these verses. He's over all. That means every principality, dominion, not only on earth, but in the heavenlies. That means he literally is over Satan. Satan is not even close to Jesus. He doesn't even have close to power. He doesn't know what Jesus, he can't even figure out who Jesus is for that matter. The demons do tremble at his presence and are able to mouth who he is, but they do not understand the ramifications of who he is. Because Jesus is not all to them. So what does it look like for Jesus to be all for you? For me? He's over all. Anything that comes from my hands, he is the creator of all. I don't get to boast or praise about anything that I have done with my time or energy. If Jesus is all in my life, then there is no room for me. I'm always second. No, I'm much farther down. If Jesus is all, I don't try to live by the golden rule. I try to live by the Christ rule. It's no longer important about me trying to treat everybody the way I want to be treated. If Christ is all, then I try to treat others the way Christ treats me, which is a much higher standard than just doing unto others what I want. But my standard as a Christian changed when Christ came into my life. And at that moment, it's up to me to make Jesus all. Therefore, how I treat you needs to be with a focus on what he would have for me to do. And that changes, doesn't it? It's not a lifeless commandment. It's a person. Trying to be pleasing to him, not pleasing to an it. Not pleasing to a teaching or a commandment or a directive. Trying to be pleasing to him. Which I can't do that if my relationship is not right. Which brings us back, if he's going to be all in you, then you've got to be following him. Because if he's not in front of you, then it's not about going to where he wants you to go, is it? Therefore, he's not your all. We are told very clearly that we are to seek him with all. He's not the only one that Jesus is all. We are told to seek him with all. Are you seeking him with your all? The reason I brought up Joe, right after we met and he said this to me. He said, because I had already told him where my favorite hunting place was, where if my back was better that day, I was going to go. And I'd already told him that. And that was part of the thing. He couldn't believe that somebody would just come up and give that kind of information, especially when you're less than 1,000, well, maybe, I don't know, about 2,000. It feels like 3, but a few thousand feet from it. Only problem is those feet were straight up. After he got done, he said, I tell you what, you have your gun? I said, yeah, it's in the back of my truck. He said, if you'll follow me, we'll go up there and hunt it together. I looked at him and I said, I don't even know whether I can carry my gun. He said, then I'll carry your gun. You follow me and we'll get there together. I said, now, I know how old I am now, but Trish, that's usually because Trish has to remind me, because I always get the days, years messed up. I either take one away, but most of the time I add one to. So I told him I was 65. I'm not even 60. I just now 64. But I told him I was 65 and broken back. I said, I'm 65. I can't keep up with you. He said, that's all right. And this is what he said. Man who doesn't know Jesus yet, he said, this is not about me getting up there. If you follow me, it's about me getting you there. And he took my backpack, and he took my rifle, and left me just like this. Well, I looked better. I was in camo. And my shirt was buttoned. I start following him. And I knew what was in store. I hunted up there many, many times. I knew this was going to be straight up. Grabbing hold of every tree, every stick you could to keep yourself from falling. But every time I slipped, his hand was always there. I know it may be hard for the Foggs and my wife to understand the relationship I have with that young man. I saw more of Christ in him. I learned more about following Christ that day. And I also knew that I was having a divine appointment with someone who did not know yet, and did not know Jesus yet, that God was using to teach me. And he got me there. And the rest is to Bob's fortune. To seek Jesus with your all means he has to always be in front of you. You will never have any problem finding him if you always keep eye contact. You'll never have any problem finding him if you just stay just a couple steps behind him. And when you are having problems making the steep climb, he'll stop when he doesn't have to, so you can get your breath, so you can straighten your back, so you can make conversation because you're trying to stall. And if you need his hand to pull you a little bit farther, it's not far from you. Jesus is above all. And according to this passage, he's not only the creator and the sustainer of all, he's above all. Is he above all in your life? Are you seeking him with your all? Or your leftovers? Is today a leftover? Praise team, take your place. You go ahead and stand. I'm going to give you a moment to do whatever you need to do at the altar. If you need some time alone, you come over to this side.